This is one of the ultimate essays that we do, and it follows up the last series we had on strategizing. You remember I mentioned about the farm, the New England farm, and the scenic thing, and one thing I forgot to mention, in all that glory, it was backed up by the presidential range. That was the backdrop, and so it was a pretty fine setting. But there was something unique about that farm when it came to the elements. There were two things that dramatically impacted us every single year. During the summer, it was electricity. Now, for whatever reason, that farmhouse was situated on that mountain in just such a way where it seemed to attract lightning from every angle. My father actually ended up putting lightning rods on the house, but it attracted more lightning, but at least it grounded it, instead of coming in playing around on water pipes and what have you. It's pretty frightening. In the winter, it was snow, and it was cold. A lot of people don't realize it, but just within sight was the top of Mount Washington, which is considered at times to be the coldest place on the planet. They say temperatures reach so far below the norm that it's unbelievable because of the way the wind whips around the top of the mountain, I gather. But on our mountain, it was pretty cold. And I remember, for example, in the evening, my dad would stoke up the furnace with wood and the kitchen stove and everything else that we had. There was no electricity, so we were totally dependent upon wood and coal, and primarily wood. But he'd stoke up everything and get it really hot. And while he was doing that, we would heat bricks on the top of our kitchen stove that my mom used to cook. And we'd heat those bricks and then wrap them up in newspaper, and then take them into the bedroom, and then run those bricks all around inside that bed, trying to warm up that bedding, and then put the bricks down at the foot and jump in and cover ourselves with, 4, 5, 6 layers of quilts and blankets or what have you, hoping to make it through the evening. One time I remember the newspaper came off the bricks. A memorable moment, when you had that in bed. Occasionally, there were mornings we'd wake up and you knew you had to get up and get out into it, but sometimes it was also another issue. You'd look out the window and all you could see was a white haze. Pretty good indication that we had been literally snowed in. The snow had covered the first floor. And actually, those were days I would kind of bounce out with a little heart in the fact that I knew my dad was probably going to say, "Funny face, you might as well get out the tarp." Now, that's T-A-R-P. And what that was is a big piece of tarpaulin, canvas, that we had cut out in a circle. And I was permitted to crawl out the attic window onto the first story of that brown garage-like structure we spoke of. And they'd pass the tarp to me, and I would unfurl it and whip it out into the snow like a fishnet, which allowed me to jump off the roof into the tarp, which kept me from sinking out of sight in the snow. And then my dad would throw me a snow shovel, and I would dig my way down to the base of the door, and he would come out, and we'd spend the rest of the day shoveling the 60 yards approximately down to the main road. A lot of work. Now, sometimes from that vantage point, and with the fact that the crystal radio that we managed to acquire was letting us know that the county plow was not going to make it through. So there's no point in shoveling your way to the road. You're not going to go anywhere anyway. So we let Mother Nature participate in some of that. On those days, we had plenty to do. There was chores inside the house, in the cellar, out in the barn, in the garage, and what have you. And they were all connected so we could get from one to the other comfortably. And we would work, and I'd enjoy the company of my dad, knowing that sometime in the afternoon, usually around 4:30, he would say, "Well, funny face, I guess we've done enough work. Do you want to do a puzzle?" I'd say, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Well, let's go get one." And so there we were going up the attic stairs, up into the attic where there were lots of puzzles, hundreds of puzzles, stacks of them, shelves laden with them. My father was an addict, and everybody knew it, so he got puzzles for birthday and Christmas and whatever. And he would impulsively buy them too whenever he saw a puzzle with a pretty picture. He said, "Well, that would be part of our collection." There were puzzles up there we'd never done. Other puzzles we had done a number of times. There were small puzzles and big puzzles, but we were going to go up there and to select a puzzle. Now, we'd walk up the stairs, and they would be boxes and boxes of these puzzles laying around like this. And they were all in such a way where you could see how many pieces were in the puzzle and what the picture was. Okay? But they were all over the place. And so we'd walk up and I'd say, oh, I think I'll do this one, Daddy. And he'd say, well, if you're going to do that one, I'll do this one. Okay? Now, the point being, we never worked on the same puzzle. Each of us had our own puzzle, we had our own puzzle board, and although I don't remember ever being mentioned, I'm certain there was a competition. You know what I mean? Like, who was going to get their puzzle done first? Frankly, I never won. My father got his puzzle put together every single time, all those years, and I could never figure out what he did. Whether it be a week or 2 or 3 from now, if you're with us, I'm going to ask you to tell me what you think it was. It was very clear once you understand it. You know, sometimes I think there's a message in that somewhere that, all around us are answers, keys to successful functioning that we often can spend a lifetime overlooking. I mean, you're talking, I was at that time probably 9 and 10 and 11, 12 years old in those years. And it wasn't until 1979, okay, that's a long time, in the second seminar that I did professionally, that I recognized, I realized what he had been doing. And boy, did it make a difference, not only in my career, but in the careers of a lot of other people. So we'll get to that. It's a very important issue. Now, if you're going to compete, you're going to have to use some judgment about what puzzle you pick. For example, this would be a pretty good competitive puzzle. A lot of straight lines, light colors. Put that one together pretty easily. You would not want to select this. Can you imagine? All dark colors, pretty picture, tough puzzle. You know, so you'd use some judgment about that. For example, this wouldn't be too bad. Not as easy as this one, but you can see that would be pretty easy to structure. I'll show you a tough one, though. Let's see. It's this one. Oh, yeah. Can you imagine? If you ever put puzzles together, that's tough. I wouldn't want to use that to compete with. I guess the point being is that using a little judgment, you might pick avenues to function in that are more manageable until you develop some skills, which further prepares you for something else. There's a point in there somewhere. I'm not going to do any of these puzzles, but I am going to spend some time this evening, this morning, this afternoon, working on this one. And the reason I chose that, I don't know if the camera will pick up what this picture is, but it's a picture of a covered bridge. And there's I guess we'd call it a river here. And the reason I chose this is that there's some nostalgia here, and that I'm absolutely certain that I have rumbled across that covered bridge in George Ward's old horse and buggy and my father's old Dodge. I mean, this, you know, this is really familiar. So we're going to go ahead and put this puzzle together this evening. Let's see. Okay, here we go. It's not going to fit. It's blue. No. How long is that going to take? You probably will never, never get that puzzle done. The point is that my life is filled, always has been, expect that it will be, filled with people who are functioning in their life this way. You know what I mean? In other words, they're working hard, doing the very best they can, maybe sometimes till early in the morning, till late at night. Couldn't work any harder, couldn't be any more diligent, couldn't be any more conscientious, okay? Couldn't be any more committed, and yet it'll never, never come together. There's no question this process here. The least we could do would be to tip it out on the table. I think you'd all agree. At least then we can begin to spread it out and do some work. But there's still something missing here. What is it that I am not doing? Okay. Could I ever get it done this way? Absolutely. There's no question. However, it would be a whole lot easier and, frankly, a whole lot more fun if I remember, as I've always have, and you probably have too, set up the picture to refer to. You know what I mean? In other words, this is what makes it fun. I'm going to put this right here, if I may. And we can refer to that from time to time. What this is a two-dimensional replica of exactly what we're trying to accomplish. it's not proportional necessarily, but it sure can be a good guide. This part of the process would be called crystallizing. We have to have a crystallized idea of where we're heading. In fact, we're going to make a point of this. Crystallize. Z. I think that's right. Crystallize. Once we have that in place, the next thing we want to do is to kind of separate color by color, putting the greens with the greens and the blues with the blues and the reds with the reds and what have you. And while we're doing that, we call it categorizing. And while we're doing that, we find an edge piece. Now, because we have this crystallized idea of where we're going, we know where this doesn't go. We're not going to waste our time putting energy into the wrong place. For example, it's not going to go anywhere along here, up here, along here. It's going to be right there at the top. And very probably, based on the color and what I see, it's going to go right in this area somewhere. Okay, and we find another edge piece. That'll be on the top, and another. And this is one, I believe, yeah. And we know where that doesn't go, but this one is going to be, because of the shape of the branches, it's going to be over here. You understand? Because we have this, we're assisted in the structure of our framework. Okay. Now, while we're doing this, is one thing we're looking for, and I may or may not be fortunate enough to spot one this evening out of this. But what am I looking for? What is it that pulls it together and gives it real? No, that's not it. Real structure. The corner pieces. So you can get those edges together, but you don't have the structure together until you find those corners. And once you find the corners, then you have a framework. Okay? This process is called categorizing, kind of setting things out where they belong. I'm going to put this down here. Categorize. Now, imagine with me, if you would, my frame is all together. My blues are with the blues and greens with greens and what have you. And so I say, okay, I'm going to find where these three pieces fit. There's three pieces there. I'm going to find where these three pieces fit. Do you understand you can't do that? Can't be done. Now, whether you're conscious of it or not, you're looking for one piece at a time. I mean, you just, now you got three pieces in your hand, but you're looking where that piece goes, and where that piece goes, and where this piece goes. In other words, the key in this process is to submit to, get good at, compartmentalizing. Compartmentalizing. I'm going to stick that down here. Compartmentalize. Now, the way this works in a puzzle, you have your framework, your pieces are there. You go to the inside of the frame, and there is a receptacle space there, a receptacle space that's quite obvious. And so we'll say that it's blue, so you go over into the blue pieces, and you look for the positive shape, the male shape that fits into that. And I was always pretty good. With visual acuity, I could look at that receptacle space, look over here, kind of check, pick up, and more often than not, place that piece. Yeah, it would fit in there. When I did that, there was another receptacle space created by that completion that was not there before. You know, I mean, there was a shape now created because of that completion that was not there before. Very important. That was just as easy to find as the first one. Okay? And so you find another one, and so on it goes. My father didn't depend upon visual acuity. He had a peculiar system that was somewhat embarrassing. I can remember so far he would do all this, but then he would pick up a piece and he'd go along the inside of that frame and try to see where it fit, and he'd put it back. And I don't know if it was a lack of vision or what, and he'd pick up another one, he'd kind of move along, and he'd put it back, and he'd pick up another one, move it along, and then he would, maybe it would fit. And then he would pick one up and move it along and put it back, and then another time he would pick it up, and sometimes he would try to invest in it working. And it didn't work, and it didn't fit. And there was that little discomfort. I would feel like, Daddy, don't do that. I wouldn't say that. I loved him too much, But you know that feeling of discomfort when you see someone doing something like that? But then he would pick it up and put it back. Once in a while, quite frankly, he would kind of do that, and he would invest in it, and leave it there. And it didn't work. Yeah, he'd leave it there, and I'd go, oh, geez. Later on, he'd find the piece that worked, and he would put that back. Anyway, compartmentalizing and remembering to focus on one piece at a time. Now, if you keep changing the piece you're looking for, how much longer might it take to do the puzzle? No, you make a selection, and you look for that piece. And I think this is probably the fastest way to get that done. What happens here? You're moving along, and say you got this much of it done here, and you begin to get a little bored, a little stagnant here, and you say, oh, there's a duck in the pond. There's a duck right there. That should be easy to find. So you rummage around, and you find what obviously is the duck, and you attempt to place that piece in the puzzle exactly where it's going to be when you get there. What's the likelihood? I would say next to impossible. Because when you get there, what are you probably going to have to do? Have some adjustments. You have to move it, in order to make it fit. Does that make sense? The point being here is that out of the tens of thousands of people that I've had in my life, working with in the past and what have you, I have so many people who look ahead, get a little frustrated, and realize there is something they cannot do yet that they're going to have to do in order to complete the task. You know what I mean? It's sort of like it's there, they know they can't do it, so why bother? Not realizing that it would just as easy as everything else to do if they would just be patient and wait until the time was right. And then that piece would be just as easy as the rest of them. Follow what I'm saying? In other words, and the thing of it is we see, well, I don't have the abilities I need to get this job done. And you're absolutely right, you don't. But you have the capacity to do that job. And as you practice and you put these pieces and develop these various abilities and skills, when you get there, the time is right. I find in my experience that public speaking, doing meetings, is a big drawback for a lot of people. They'll come into a business and they're told that if you're going to really be successful here, you're going to have to start running meetings sooner or later. And within days, they have given up because they don't do meetings. They remember in school they were put off by public speaking and what have you, Or someone will say, well, you're going to have to recruit. And I've never recruited. I can't do that. Or you're going to have to, keep records, keep statistics. Oh, gee, paperwork, that's not for me. And they'll turn and walk away from a glorious, glorious opportunity. All I'm saying is everything is easy in its time. Everything becomes easy in its time. Another thing that happens when we're puzzling, if you would, you're moving along and you get to this point right here and say, oh, that should be easy. Got some red, a little brown on it, what have you. So you go over into those pieces and you look and, that doesn't fit. Might even do what my daddy did. No, that doesn't fit. You're looking and looking, and pretty soon you're looking, and you're shaking the box and kicking the crate, the missing piece. Every doggone it, the missing piece. Every puzzle seems to have one. Have you ever noticed? I don't think I've ever put together a puzzle. It didn't have this sense about it. There was the missing piece. And you got some choices to make. You're going to say, I don't want to put together a puzzle with a missing piece and pack it up and put it in a box. If you do that, you may never complete a puzzle because the next puzzle is probably going to have a missing piece in it, at least that sense of it. Or are you going to continue, realizing that even if the piece is missing, what's our purpose here this evening? It's spending the companionable silence with Daddy. You know what I mean? It's filling the time with project. There's always conversation and togetherness when this is going on. That's really what we're about. And the completion is going to be pretty satisfying. And so you continue. And so you continue. And maybe an hour later, 2, maybe 3, something will jump off that table like it had a little spring behind it. You know what I mean? Like, hey, yeah, it's the missing piece. And you'll always wonder, where in the heck was it? Why couldn't I see that? Well, we don't know. Maybe that's just the way the success muses have of testing you. Do you really want to do the puzzle? You're going to have to put up with the missing piece. And I'm saying that to complete, just to continue through with your commitment is a terribly important thing. For example, they say that Henry Ford, when he built his first car, by the time he was like a third of the way through, it was at least 100 things he knew was wrong. And so he could have stopped and started over again, or completed the car and then corrected. thank goodness he completed the first car. You know, because otherwise he might have got stuck and we'd still be riding around horse and buggies. We don't know. The thing of it is, completion seems to be the key. Now, how easy, by the way, is it to put in those last few pieces? Say there's maybe 10 or 12 pieces left. Man, you're really good at it by then. You know what I mean? It's so easy. Which does give us a message that that's true all the way back to the very beginning of the puzzle. That every step, for example, when you've crystallized, when you've categorized, is the puzzle harder or easier than it was? See, it's easier. And then you begin to compartmentalize. And every piece you place, the puzzle gets easier and easier and easier. Does that make sense? It's terribly important to hold on to that. Because in life and in some of its challenges, things seem to get harder and harder. And that's really not a truism. You're developing certain abilities and skills. It's kind of like when you get into something, what have you done? You have developed abilities and skills. You quit and start over, hey, you're right back at the beginning again. A person could do that their whole lifetime. A whole lifetime. I will admit that in our society, our socioeconomic environment, with 1,000 puzzles in the attic, it would pay to take some time. You know, see, here's the thing. We would go up in that attic, and I bet you sometimes we'd spend an hour, 2 hours, pulling, sifting, sorting, stacking, ultimately selecting the puzzle we were going to spend our time on. We live in a Baskin-Robbins world today with all kinds of opportunities, all kinds of things to do. That even some of those doors were shut to us several years ago. I remember in 1955, the Navy lost my pay record, and I went out to find a part-time job. What I'd been doing in the military was administrative clerical work. Well, civilian life hadn't caught up to that. And for me to get an administrative clerical type part-time job was almost an impossibility because that was for women only. You know, there were no male secretaries back in those days. You know what I mean? And so I had to keep looking and ended up in sales, doggone it. But of course I fell in love too. You know, I found, wow, this is an exciting, interesting place. The puzzle gets done. The puzzle gets done, and we kind of, you know, line it up, and we admire it, and Mom calls us for dinner, and we don't want to leave it almost, you know. But as we leave it, and we're sitting there pondering over it at dinner, we think, hey, you know what I think I might do? Just shellac that. Put a coat of shellac on that, and secure those pieces together, and maybe frame it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And by the way, I've seen that. I've been in some homes in my career where they had shellacked and framed that picture. Had it up on the wall. And it was kind of touching when you see it. You know, you knew that probably a young couple didn't have a lot. During the course of putting that puzzle together, they probably had communicated and shared a dream and perhaps made love. You know what I mean? It was significant to them. And you wonder if it's still on their wall. Probably not. You know what I mean? It's lost its value, its sentimentality. But we do complete them. And typically what we do, because when we're done, is to take and put it away and start another one on another day. That makes sense? I have done this, by the way, from beginning to end without ever mentioning the word goal. Pretty significant in my mind. Never mentioned the word goal. Got a thing about goals. Have had for a long time. My experience tells me that I can go anywhere in the free enterprise system, any country, any office practically, where there's a sales force, for example, and you go in and say, "Good morning, everybody. We're here to talk about goals this morning," and everybody's going to get kind of, they roll their eyes and move their head like, "Oh, geez, not again. I've heard this, done that, been there. Even had a T-shirt once, you know, set goals." And they just don't seem to work for me. You know, that's the feeling that you get oftentimes. And that has to be examined pretty carefully. Has to be examined pretty carefully. I know my first experience with goals, I guess, let's see, I started on a Saturday in selling in 1955, and I knew I had a problem. You know what I mean? So by Monday, I'm in a library looking through the Cardex files, looking to find some books on selling. And I managed to find one. It was called How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success in Selling. It was by a fellow named Frank Bettger, B-E-T-T-G-E-R, and by the way, I'd write that down. Frank Bettger, B-E-T-T-G-E-R, How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success in Selling. I thought, that's a good title. I haven't failed yet. This might be a good book, and I can short-circuit that process. So I bought the book, and it was good, and I'd still recommend it to anybody. It's a primer. It's a fine, fine book. One of the things he talked about in there, as a young man, was sitting at home one day, and his sales manager called on him and came in and visited, and while he was there, said, I'd like to see your goal list while I'm here to maybe figure out how I can assist you in getting what you want and achieve everything you'd like. And he said, we didn't have a goal list. We didn't have a goal list. And so the manager gave us a couple pieces of paper, numbered 1 to 10, and said, here, make a list. And Frank Bettger said that was the beginning of a whole new life for him.